Good evening, everybody. I do believe we are live now. Let's have a look. Where have I gone? So how is everybody? Are we okay? Everybody all right? Let me know in the comments below who's here. That would be utterly, utterly fantastic. So tonight we are continuing on with our discussion around what you need to be thinking about as part of your safeguarding audit. And tonight, I'm just... Sorry, I got some weird message there. So tonight we're talking about safeguarding audits. Particularly, we're talking about those looking at online delivery. That's what we're looking at tonight. There we go, audit. And so yes, so welcome to tonight's online delivery discussion. It's part of our series around safeguarding audits. And tonight I'm going to share with you my 5 areas that you need to be thinking about in terms of online delivery. We've already looked at training. We've looked at policies and procedures and risk assessments. And the next stage in your safeguarding audit is to look at the online delivery. This is particularly important now because whereas when we hit the first wave of the pandemic, it was a relatively fluid issue and there was no mandate from government in order to provide remote or online learning, that position has changed. So where we are now is that it is legislated, it is now a requirement that education providers do have a remote way of delivering the curriculum. So in tonight's live, I'm going to be sharing the 5 key areas that you need to be thinking about in terms of your online delivery. And we're particularly talking about face-to-face in this sort of format. Although you can apply what we're going to talk about to non-face-to-face systems, and I'll be talking a little bit about that as we move through tonight's live at 8. The first key thing you need to consider, and this doesn't matter whether you are part of the IT department, whether you are part of the safeguarding team, or whether you are there as part of the senior leadership team or curriculum leads. You need to think about the platform you are going to use for your remote delivery. The platform you choose could have any multitude of purposes and could have any multitude of functionality available to it. But it's really important that when you look at the platform that works for you, you are considering a number of key issues. Those key issues include accessibility, compliance with various pieces of legislation, such as GDPR and data protection, the ability to store information, or the ability to access via browser, or does it have to be via app? When you're looking at delivery via an online method, it needs to be as accessible as possible while still being safe. There are lots and lots of tried and tested platforms out there, but there are also a lot of very, very new platforms that have sprung up. So make sure that you are doing your due diligence. And as safeguarding lead, do not simply leave it to your IT team to tell you that it is compliant. with the greatest of respect to IT teams, they do not have overall responsibility for safeguarding in your organisation. That falls to the DSL. You have to make sure with their guidance that the platforms that are being chosen are appropriate for your needs. It doesn't disappear, that duty, simply because somebody else has chosen the platform. So be aware, what are you using? Why are you using it? How are you using it? Those are really key questions to be asking, and also thinking about its accessibility for staff, accessibility for students. Are you expecting parents to log on as well? Lots of things there to consider as part of your determination as to the right platform to use when you're looking at remote delivery. Number 2, and probably the most key thing to consider: location, location, location. Where are you when you are delivering remotely? Let's say you've chosen your platform. Let's say that you are going to be delivering lessons in an online fashion. You won't be delivering it hiding behind slides. You are going to be delivering it live in the way I'm coming to you this evening. You need to consider very, very carefully what your camera can see. I've talked a lot about this over the last 6 months, and yet I am still presented with situations and cases whereby an adult in a position of trust has put themselves in a very, very difficult situation. I'm also presented with a number of cases whereby those who have responsibility have not been aware of the locations that were being used. It is really, really important that you check your surroundings. You check who can hear you. You check what is in your background. You also check what is in the foreground. Are there things that are going to distract you in front of you? The reason for this is really, really simple. It's about security and protecting yourself as a staff member. You might not be able to come into your organisation in order to deliver, and for a variety of reasons, not least because at the moment, as we stand in October 2020, there are a number of local lockdowns happening, which also means that there is a knock-on impact in terms of schools and organisations where they would deliver remotely or deliver face-to-face. They're having to deliver remotely again, or perhaps for the very first time. You need to consider what is going on around you, who can see you, who can see what's behind you, and think about, if you move, what else is behind you that you may not want others to see, but what's to the side of you and what's in front of you that may well either fall down or become caught on camera that you maybe don't want to be seen either. So that's part 1 of location, location, location. Part 2 is, where are your students placing their cameras? It's part of your online safety, part of your online discussions around this for remote delivery. You need to be educating your students about this sort of issue. Remember, they are inviting people into their private spaces. They may not be able to access at college, particularly if you've gone into lockdown or their bubble is maybe having to self-isolate. So they may be exposing their backgrounds to a number of different things, not least of all inviting the rest of their class, or at least their bubble, into their private space that they may never have seen before, and they may not ordinarily wanted to have invited those people in. Which brings me to number 3 in terms of key things to be considering. Video or no video? As the facilitator, you are probably going to have your video on. I don't think you're going to have much of a choice in that. But there is a discussion to be had about whether or not it's appropriate for students to have their cameras on. Yes, it makes it easier to determine who is paying attention, to determine whether or not there's anything happening that's distracting students, or to see if they're messing about in chat functions if you can't see that. But there's another side to that. What about those students who simply do not want to invite the rest of the class in? Those students for whom home is not a safe place, or where there are very little belongings, or it's just generally dilapidated for maybe not a safeguarding reason, but because the family just isn't able to keep on top of it, or it's a rented property that the family are in and the landlord is perhaps less than attentive to the property's needs. As safeguarding lead, you are probably going to have to make a judgment call for some of these. You might have students coming to you asking whether or not they have to have their camera on. You might have teachers approaching you with concerns about what they have seen behind the student. This is a really multifaceted issue. It's really not as simple and straightforward to say everybody's video's off, everybody video's on. It's one of those situations where you are going to have to think about what is best for that student, taking into account that they may be things they don't want students to see, but also having to balance that with the risk of them being picked on or bullied or made out to be something other, if that is the situation. It may also be the situation on the reverse, where you have students who are in a class and they have things in their room that maybe they don't want to show, that they aren't as, that they're more affluent than the other students. It doesn't just happen one way. You need to think about what might be happening either way, and don't dismiss those concerns from students from maybe more affluent backgrounds who are worried about the implications of showing their bedrooms or their family spaces to the wider community, if that means that they are going to feel at risk. Particularly for older students, it may be that they are in a community whereby there is a lot of crime and they don't want to expose themselves as having slightly more possessions than maybe their counterparts. So there's often a good reason why students don't want this, but it's your responsibility as safeguarding lead, working with your teachers to determine what is the best way forward in these sorts of situations. So number 4, let's think about connection and security. By that I mean, do you have a suitable internet connection in order to facilitate remote delivery? If you aren't able to deliver from your workspace, do you have a suitable connection speed to deliver from home? Like I say, for lots of teachers, this is the first time that they are faced with having to present in this way. Now, for the vast majority, I'm wholly aware that they will be able to be in classrooms, they'll be able to be in workspaces, and so this is likely to be a very minor issue. However, for some, particularly those in more rural areas, it may well be that they simply do not have the connectivity to deliver in this fashion. Also think about those staff members, those colleagues who are having to deliver as well as homeschool their own children. This is a really difficult situation to be in, and one that might require a bit of balancing and a bit of honest and open communication with the rest of your team. Something to think about. Part two of that is security. Now, very, very few of us will have a secure internet connection. By that, I mean an encrypted connection that you would expect to see that hospitals transfer, sometimes schools will transfer data across on. The police, CPS, local government will use secure networks as well. At home, if your internet is password protected, you may well be fine. But think about those organisations that are now offering some space to work, and maybe it's a temptation to go and work in a coffee shop. Maybe you're not working all day, maybe rather you're not delivering training or delivering lessons all day. Maybe you don't have to worry about assemblies, but maybe you can't get into the office but need a change of venue for your own sanity and your own well-being. And it can be very tempting to go and access the internet at a cafe, at a multitude of places. I've seen local pubs now start to open up and offer Wi-Fi services with unlimited tea and coffee to help themselves along. But you have to think about what information you're planning to share. Even if it's just I'm sending a few emails, what does that information, what does that email contain? Is it personal information about a student? Is it information about a staff member that is being shared? What is the security level of the connection that you're using? If you're using an open Wi-Fi connection, even if it has a password attached to it, if you're using it in a public space, you are always increasing the risk of something untoward happening. And whilst I can hear you cry, that would never happen, nobody would do that, nobody would be so stupid. You look at the multitude of people up and down the country who are taking their laptops off to go and get a cup of coffee outside of the house, to go and get 5 or 10 minutes peace and to attend to something that needs doing where they need that peace and quiet. It can happen far easier than you think, and is something that you absolutely have to keep top of mind when you are looking at what happens in terms of remote delivery. And that brings me to my final point, point 5, which is about sharing of documentation. Depending on your delivery method, depending on the platform you have chosen, it might be really simple for you and for your organisation to share with students documentation they need all on the same platform. And they might be able to access their links to the webinars or to classroom training, all from the same space. But I'm aware that lots of organisations, lots of schools and colleges, lots of independent teachers, trainers, are all using a hybrid method. Even the court system is using a multitude of different avenues in order to access the court system. So think about, how are you sharing that document? First of all, what is that document that you're sharing? If it's with students, it's probably not going to contain personal data. That is a worry when you send it out. But what about when they send it back? How are they sending it back? Is that via email? Is that via Dropbox or via OneDrive? Does it go into one of the platforms that you're using in order for you to retrieve it from there? How is that happening? Think about information around staff. Maybe there is a concern about a particular student or a staff member, and you, as part of your senior leadership team role, are having conversations remotely, maybe via Teams, maybe via Zoom, maybe via another platform that is available. Those two just seem to be the most popular at the moment. Think about what it is you are sharing and why you are sharing it. It's really important when you're working remotely to think about the methods of communication. Should you simply pick up the phone and have that conversation? Does it need to be sent via email, or can you have the telephone conversation and put your notes into your online system in the most secure way fashion? If you're sharing emails, think about where that's going. Who is it to? Is it another secure email that you're using? Or is it to a governor who maybe is still using a Hotmail or a Google Mail account? So you need to be aware of that and really consider what you're doing and how you're doing it. I'm not saying you should never be sharing information this way. I could never run my business without the internet, but you do have to think about those little things before you take those steps. Take a moment to think about, is this the most appropriate way to share this information? Is this the most appropriate place for me to be cited or seated when we are looking at delivering online training or remote learning? Is this the most accessible way that we can do that? Those few questions before you send anything, before you turn that camera on, or before you access your online systems could be the big difference between being safe and breaching GDPR. If you're worried about any of this, then please feel free to get in touch. I do offer a consultancy service, as you know, and I'd love to assist you if you are struggling with this. Please do not struggle on your own. Send me a direct message, send me an email, or you can simply comment below and let me know what your thoughts are. Until next week, have a safe week.